Now that EGS is on the scene, the question is, how well do they stack up against the big boys like CGC? So I'm going to finish my comprehensive review, this time having a look at their labels, the cases themselves, and their grading. Alright, so let's start this one looking at the labels. Overall, the EGS labels hold all the necessary information with your grade and the comic information as the artist, the writer, etc. that you would expect on any of the labels. They also have the little foil thing here. While the variety of color options is nice for display purposes, I do think it detracts a little bit from the professionalism of having your book slapped. Because there's so many options for colors, there is then no color coding to tell you what kind of book this is. If you look at this, given what the standard is in grading, you would assume that this is a signed book. However, it's not. I simply match the red and the yellow to the red and the yellow on the book. To me, that's a bit of a problem when you're talking about professional archiving. The labels should have some distinction that represents what they are. The community's already decided blue is for a standard grading, yellow or something similar to yellow is for signature series, and then you have things like qualified grades and so on and so on. The fact that they do these color options, like I said, is nice for display purposes if you just want something to put on your wall, but in my opinion does take away from the professional archiving of these books. That aside, the custom options that you can get for having something, a picture or something on here, I find is low quality because you're really only getting clip art or non-royalty images. It's not like CGC where you're going to get a Fantastic Four image or a Moon Knight image or whatever it is that your book qualifies for. You can have them do the custom artwork, but it's all clip art royalty free, which I think makes the book look really cheap. 9 out of 10 don't look great, in my opinion. If you just want it for display and it suits you, that's great. But for my collection, it looks way out of whack with everything else that I've got going on my display wall or my cabinets. So the labels are a bit of a miss. Additionally, I think the paper and print quality should be a bit higher. They're not bad. Like I said, it has all the information, the numbers, the writing, the text is all great. It's very readable. It does have their foil there, so it's legit. But on close inspection, you can see some of the print lines. I believe they should invest in a higher quality printer, something very professional, to print these labels and give it a more polished look. As it stands, it doesn't have the fit and polish of something from CGC or CBCS that gives it that very authentic look. One absolute downside to these labels is that there's no barcode like what you get for CBCS, and there is no database, as far as I can tell, to look up your certification number like on CBCS or CGC. Moving on to the cases. EGS does a great job of presenting a clean and clear case. They claim 99% UV protection, and the case feels sturdy and protective. There is a bit of noise when I wiggle this one. And I can actually feel the air moving in and out of the case. So this isn't as tight or complete a seal as some of the other books maybe. So as you can see in a few of these overhead shots, the cases do have actually a bit of creaking and movement to them that I didn't notice the first time around when I was unboxing it. I would say that that is actually quite comparable to what was happening with the CGC cases when I did that review. They also had the same kind of creaking and cracking when you move them. And that's just, I think, because the plastic is kind of a stiff plastic. So What about the air? You can hear the air coming in and out, and I think that has to do with the fact that these are not recessed cases the way the CGC and CBCS cases are. This is one flat piece, and you can see from top to bottom, there's no dividing line here for the upper well. It's just one complete plastic slab. EGS uses an inner and outer well system, but unfortunately, the comic sleeve is not snug enough in the case, leading to sagging and opportunities for the inner sleeve to move. This can be problematic for collectors that are looking to display their books. I don't know if you can tell here, but there is a level of sagging that happens with the book. In the bottom edge here, it kind of swoops down. I'm trying to get you guys there. You can see a bit of it there. See, there's a bit of a bend in the book. So the way it's floating, it seems to be that the sleeve is just floating in place. There's nothing actually keeping it against the front or back of the case. Compared with a CGC case, all right, I'm trying to get a good shot here. So CGC's cases here, there's this bit of a lip. And what that does is it brings the front of the plastic here more firmly against this inner well, against this inner sheet. So this slides in here. And then when the case closes, that inner well is pressed against the depressed front and back of the case to keep it nice and snug so it doesn't sag, it doesn't float around. With the EGS case, I could be wrong, but the way that the book is sagging here, I don't think that exists on these cases. Easily solved, EGS. If you want to improve these cases one more step, make it so that they sit nice and firm against the case. That way there's no sagging on the bottom or the top of the book. Finally, let's get to the actual grading itself. So in my opinion, the grading here is very fair. It's also very transparent given that they offer you these certificate of authenticities that come with your book, stuck on the back, and include the grader's notes. So there is justification for every grade that they give you. Even on my Moon Knight 9.8, there is included grader's notes that say corner scuff, top and bottom left corner, front cover. So I know why I lost that 0.2 on the basically perfect book. So I know why I lost the 0.2 on my near mint book. Something that CGC and CBCS really don't do with books that high, and EGS does it on every book. So my concern with EGS and their grading is not that they're inconsistent right now, because there's, I think, one grader. I think the president, Anthony, is also doing the grading, which is fine. But what happens as the company grows? Are they able to maintain that consistency across all of their grading? That's the big problem with CGC. As far as I can tell, the grades have been swinging wildly in the last year or two. Sometimes consistent, sometimes not. So overall, if you can't stick to your grading scale, it kind of undermines your legitimacy as a guarantor company as far as I'm concerned. Right now, EGS is consistent. I think his grades are fair. But can they maintain that consistency if the company continues to grow? That I don't know yet. So in the first video, I did say we had to talk about this book a little bit more when I unboxed it. This is a fair grade as far as I'm concerned. I did do some cleaning and pressing on this book. The cover was dirty and not flat, and the back of the book had a big water stain that I've managed to reduce considerably. Some of the creasing and scratching is obviously still there, which they did note on the grader's notes. However, I know that some conservation work was done to this book because I did it. There was a split in the paper for this for the staple to pull through on the front cover, as well as on one of the center pages, I believe. So I did apply some tape. I didn't use Scotch tape or anything like that. I got myself book repair tape, what you would use for repairing an antique book if you're a professional repairing that. So I used the right tape. I didn't do anything crazy. I just taped up the little seam where it was ripping through to provide it a little bit more support. So the cover was nice and tight, nothing was pulling through. Of course, if you yank it, it was going to rip through regardless. But kept everything intact. I have to give them a bit of a break because even though I knew the tape was there, just looking at it, I couldn't see it. I knew where I put it and where to look, and I really couldn't see it. It didn't really show up under my black light. So I got to give them a pass. I don't think CGC would have caught it either, to be clear. I did reach out and ask them about their stance because I believe they're using the Overstreet guide for grading as their basis, which, if you're unfamiliar with Overstreet was the first to put out a proper guide for people to use to grade their comics. They had iterations over the years, and eventually that's what CGC adapted to their own system. There's slight differences, but I'm not that familiar with Overstreet, so I did reach out and ask. I know with CGC, you are allowed some small amount of tape on a gold or silver age book if it's done in a conservation effort and not, to like marry two books together that aren't meant to be together or something like that. You would still get the universal label if it's used in a conservation effort to support the structure of the book, which is the case here. So I did ask EGS and they said the same. If it's a gold or silver age book, it does qualify for universal label with a bit of tape, but it would be noted on the grader's notes, which they just didn't pick it up on this book. It's not in the grader's notes anywhere. I did ask about what if you considered the book to be conserved or restored, where would that show up? And they said that would show up on the label. On the label, it would say conserved or restored. So this Black Panther book got through with some conservation effort on my part. 77, so this does not qualify as a silver age. And if it did, it should have it in the grader's notes, but they didn't catch it. I snuck it through. Again, I think I would have snuck it through on CGC as well. So where does that put us in the end? I think the grading is pretty fair on these books, even with the conservation effort getting through on this one, because it didn't really heighten the grade at all. The grade is the grade, and I think it's a pretty fair grade, to be honest. Okay, so we do need to quickly talk just about the pricing of these books when you do submit them. My submission video and customer service video, I don't know if I touched on that, so I want to make sure I cover it here before we wrap up and get my final thoughts on EGS. So these books were all submitted under their second fastest tier. I didn't want to go all the way and be paying $50 a book or whatever the cost was. I didn't want to go the cheapest, so I went middle of the line. They were $35 a book, as silver, bronze, modern. So turnaround time was fast. For 35 bucks, you get reasonable grading. You get a clear case, even though I don't like the sagging. You get a nice clear case, and your books are reasonably safe inside as long as you're not jostling them around. At the same price point, CBCS just reduced their prices on their mid tiers. So $31 to $34. If I was submitting these books to CBCS, it'd be $31 to $34 per book. So it's in line. You're going to wait a little bit longer at CBCS. So if you just want the fast turnaround times and something for your collection, the price of $35 is not bad. So how do they stack up against the big boys like CGC and CBCS? I think that is a bit of a different question. If you are looking just to preserve your books and you like the idea of the colored labels so that you can match them to your books or have them nicely on display, however you want to display it, I think totally fine. So what you're getting back is a fair grade and your books are reasonably protected. Again, I don't like that the book slides around in the case a little bit, but if you're just putting them on display and you're not worried about moving them around too much or taking them back and forth to shows, totally fine. The case itself is protective. I think this case is solid and on par with what CGC is offering. except for the fact that there's no separation and the book isn't completely pressed. A few things for them to improve upon with the next iteration. But because they do not have yet the wide acceptance, you are not getting a dollar return on your EGS slab books, I think. If you're going to turn around and try and flip a book, or you're slabbing them so that you can sell them on eBay or Facebook or whatever, or at comic shows, I don't think that is there. So for me, my PC, this, although it looks nice, this is going to go in my display case over here with my other Black Panther stuff. And the Moon Knight fits in just fine with the blue label. Otherwise, the colored labels in that don't really match up with the rest of my personal collection, right? These yellow labels on my wall are all signed books. I don't want any kind of confusion there. And the other colored labels, although I think this actually looks okay, might be fine for display, it doesn't really fit the rest of my collection. And the custom labels that they do, I really personally don't like. You might like them, they might fit for your collection, but for me, and the fact that I like the archived look, right? I get a lot of my books graded to archive them, to preserve them. I think that is detracted from a little bit with the custom labels using the clip art. Even a little bit with some of these, just the colored labels. Although they look nice, I think there's a little bit of lack or reduction in the archiving efforts there. So there you go. There's my comprehensive review of EGS. If you got something out of the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. I do a bunch of reviews and unboxings of this sort. Leave a comment. Let me know if you've got any experience with EGS and what do you think of them compared to CGC and CBCS. Otherwise, keep watching. I've got a video up here of my latest unboxing. I'll catch you in the next video.